session at our QA track at IGDA. I hope you know my name by now. I'm Amy Nanto with VMC. And again, thank you for being here today. Also on behalf of Casual Connect and IGDA, just appreciate your time here and thank you for your participation. So my next guest is Graemme Jennings. And Graeme is from 343 Industries. And I know a lot of you are Halo fans and probably very excited about Halo 4 at E3 with their announcement as well. So Graeme is the senior producer on Halo 4. And what he's going to be talking about today is how to draw QA closer to the development cycle and how to integrate QA into the process. So I'll pass it on to you now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start off with a little slide, just a little bit about me first, because the presentation talks about stuff I've done in the past and why I did it, so those will kind of tie it together. This isn't like a publishing of a CV, by the way. So, as you said, at the minute, I'm at 343. I've been here for 5 months now, just coming on 5 months, so it's good, it's a change. Before that, I came from Ubisoft Montreal. So the change for me really at the minute is I went from a huge studio in Ubisoft Montreal, which was part of a smaller company, to now 343, which is a small studio as part of an absolutely huge company in Microsoft. So that's a bit of a change in that side. And this is the first time for me as well. I've not worked for a company that just made games. I've always just worked for games companies, and obviously Microsoft's focus, a small percentage of that is games. So before that, before I moved to Ubisoft, I worked at Reflections in the UK on the Driver franchise. So I held a variety of different positions. Again, this is topical to this talk because I'm going to go through what I learned from these different places. So I was Infogrames employed to begin with, and as Reflections were owned by Infogrames, and then we got bought by Ubisoft, so I became a Ubisoft employee by default. And last but not least, where I started and where it all began and kind of why I'm here today is I started in QA at Electronic Arts in 1999. I remember at that point, I was looking for a summer job out of university and I saw a game tester position, so I was like, okay, I'll take that. And at that time, my dad said, there's no money in games and you shouldn't do that. But I think that shows how wrong he was at the end, and we haven't had that discussion again since that point. And last but not least is if anyone's wondering where my accent comes from, that is the answer. Because I've been asked, I don't know how many times in the last while, in which part of Ireland I came from, but I don't really want to upset people and tell them it's actually Scotland. So what am I going to talk about today? Well, after I was asked to do this talk, I had a lot of different topics I was thinking about doing, and this one came to mind because it was something I deal with quite a lot, and no matter what phase of the project I'm in or which project I'm on, it comes up a lot of the time. So what is us versus them? So I guess we could say it's QA integration to some point, but for me I feel it's a step a bit past that, so I'm going to explain this further as we go. Last point, for me, there's a real approach to the us versus them topic because it's how you phrase when you talk to people. Because I remember when we were doing executive reviews at Ubisoft, we used to get builds, we used to show upper management what we were doing, so the president or Yves Guillemot. And my old boss, he was like, okay, what are you going to show us? So, you know, it was a distinctive line between where we were and where he was. Then I got a new boss and he came in and he's like, what are we going to show them? So it really made, even at my level, it made a really big difference to say, this is what we're doing and we're together as part of it. So this is a little bit on this talk as well. So it's important when we're going through this, how you talk to your people, and, you know, you phrase what you're going to do. So this was the hardest slide for me to do because I was trying to find a slide that had kind of a look in the past bit. So the best one I could find was something that had a reflection. But this was the last slide I couldn't finish this morning until I found this. But it's a nice picture to look at, I guess, anyway. So I'm going to talk a bit about just the history through me and what I learned and when I started. So my first QA job, as I said, was for EA. It was very segregated. So we worked on site at a developer, but it wasn't an EA-owned developer. So we had the real publisher-developer relationship, where we were obviously the publisher and they were the developers. We had no access to the production team, so we sat downstairs. We weren't able to go upstairs. It was just really segregated between the two of us. So there was kind of a really fine line there between that. When we got builds, we got no build notes. I'll just bring the next point up as well. And it was PlayStation 1 day, so it was disk only. It was like, here's your disk, kicked over the fence, test the stuff, put it in, done. That was it. And I know things have changed a bit, but this was the beginning part for us. And all the communication, because we didn't see the production team and we didn't sit with them, it was all done via the database. So as we all know, there's a big difference between talking to people when you know them and you speak to them than when you just type stuff in a database. Last but not least, I realize this is still reality for some. I still have some friends where this is still the case. You have no access to the developer, disks are thrown at you, you have no build notes, you don't know what's going on. So, I mean, just out of interest, does anyone have this reality or something close at the minute? Put your hand up if you do. I guess by a few people that are laughing, I assume that's the case. So, I'm going to go through the key points for lessons learned from this. So, this is my kind of reflection on this through the years. So it's a while ago, so it's a bit fuzzy in some points, but it kind of sticks to the point. So I think the first point for me was we had no documentation of intent for features. We didn't know what the features were supposed to do. We tested the best we could, and we put bugs in where we thought they were the case, but we didn't really know. There was no design specs. On the other side of that, because I guess we put in vague bugs to some extent, and we didn't spend time producing bugs for the development team, the developers, they spent 50% of their time in debug testing themselves. And I mean, that, as we all know, is not a good use of developer time if they're spending their time at testing instead of fixing. We had no build notes either. So not only did we not know how the features were implemented, what they were supposed to do, we didn't know what had been done in that build. We didn't know what to look for, what to take care of. We just didn't know. Builds came down, that was it. The last point, well, second last point actually, we were disk only, so we were always behind what was going on upstairs. They'd worked on our stuff, they'd kicked out a disk, we started testing it, we had maybe 1 or 2 disks a week, so the build had processed a lot. And at this point, this was 99, so the team size was about 60 or so, but last project for me at Ubisoft, it was like 170, so we all know the volume of check-ins that are going to come in at that point with a team that size. So if you're always days behind what's going on, it's not really beneficial to really keep the build in a good state. Other point, we had a lot of broken builds. Again, it was all over the fence, burn a disk, take the disk, test the disk, done. There was no pre-testing. We didn't really know what had gone in. They just kicked the builds down and they went. And with the 1 or 2 disk strategy a week, if the second disk was broken, it meant we stayed on one build for an entire week, which is a long time to spend on one. And the last point, which is really the last point, is this was all very reactive. We dealt with what came to us and we bugged what we could and we took care of what we could, but we didn't do anything to help make the build better on the way down. So that was my first experience, but to be honest, it was a good introduction to the industry really. It was, it wasn't too difficult. It was a way to learn and to see stuff. Actually, I missed one point. The last point on this was communication, as seems to be the case with me just now, as communication was difficult. Obviously, we didn't have access to the developers. Most stuff was through the database, and there was a little bit, I guess, in email. But again, none of it was face-to-face, which seems to be a real shame, given the fact that these guys at that point were just upstairs. So after that, I moved on and took another QA job with a different company. So first change, we sat in the same building and we sat in an open access where we could talk to developers, which obviously made a big difference. And this time I worked for the developer. So the us versus them thing was taken away. We were all globally us. We all had the same goal. We all had to make the same build. We all had to get it out. So that broke down some of the walls to that extent at that point. Again, as we sat with them and I worked for them, we had direct access to them. Can you show me this? Can we look at this? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, that made a huge difference, as I'll cover in the next slide. But at this point, we were still on disk only. So it was only PS2, but everything was still disk. We didn't test in another way. Disks were bonded and given us to us. So because we got to sit together and we got to work with them and I could work directly with the devs, we could debug for them. So it's like, show me this bug. Dev's doing his coding, we do the bug for them, they do it. So they spent more time actually coding, which obviously in the end, if the devs spend more time coding, you get a higher quality build at the end of it. Direct communication, faster fixing, for sure. We could talk with them direct, we could show them stuff, they could ask us questions, what does this bug mean, how do we go, where does it go, and it did definitely lead to faster fixing rather than an anonymous bug that comes through the database from someone you don't know. And to some extent, sometimes they're not very clear, so it's not really easy to fix them. this is a personal thing, but for sure it's easier to be developer QA, definitely. I mean, it's a personal opinion, but from my experience, you know, you're together, you work with them, you help them, rather than being the big bad publisher who, you know, makes you fix the bugs by a certain time. But again, one of the key things, and you'll see why I keep iterating this point later on, is it's still all very reactive. We get the disk, we test it, nothing's done in advance. We're just dealing with what's landed and come to us at that point. So then there was a change for me. So I moved to Reflections before, so I moved over to level design. I left QA, I had a chance to do something a bit different, and it was exciting too. So I took a position in level design on a game called Stuntman in 2001. But this is now, and this is now this is a really self-critical slide where I'm going to go through the points that stuff I didn't do. So I didn't update the documentation. So I was in charge, I was building levels, I was building functionality for the game, but we had design docs that had been done some time before, but I didn't update them, I didn't care, shoe was on the other foot, whatever, just get on with it. No database comments. So all the stuff I complained about, I bitched about, oh, I don't know what's going on with this bug, I can't test this, blah, blah, blah. That was me, did the same thing to someone else. So close stuff, will not fix, no comment for why not, will not fix, not a defect, no comments, nothing. So again, you know, I'm just doing whatever I want, no problems. This is another key one. I left stuff, as still happens these days, I left work local for days. So I was busy working on a new mission, I was taking care of it. I didn't check it in, so no one's testing it at this point. I'm busy just playing with it on my machine, getting stuff in, but it's not checked in for anyone else to look at. Obviously, we shouldn't be checking work in when it's broken at a point, but we should incrementally be checking things in rather than just leaving stuff local on your machine and then doing something later on. And the last point, checked in without too much care. So stuff was coming along, we just put it in, kicked into the database, bye, say goodbye, bugs came back, no problems. I mean, this is, you know, like I say, this is a self-critical slide, but these are the things that I'd complained about and cried about for months before, and now it was me who was doing it to someone else. And the last point, I forgot where I came from. These things shouldn't have been like that. I'd been on the other side of the fence, I'd seen what it was like to have no build notes, I'd seen what it was like to have old documentation, and now I was doing it to someone else. So the key points from this, from the other side of this, when you're a developer, outdated documentation equals irrelevant bugs, for sure. We had mission documentation that specified, it was the game Stuntman, it had cars coming from different places, helicopters coming in, all this kind of thing. I hadn't updated it, so we were getting bugs that matched the document, but the document didn't match reality. But I'd never updated the document, so that's why these things came in. So this was time for me spent to deal with these bugs that weren't relevant, but they should never have gone in if I'd done my job properly in the first place. Unclear comments from me in the database, this wasted my time. So I marked bugs as will not fix or not a defect or whatever else. I wasn't clear why that was the case or what the intention was. So these bugs came back to me, so it was time for me to deal with them again. If I'd dealt with that properly to begin with, I wouldn't have been doing this. These never would have come back. Chasing the ghost bugs and crashes. So in these days, the bugs, we used to get the random crash bugs that came in. So we used to spend an enormous amount of time chasing crashes that may have existed in a build, but didn't have enough didn't have enough steps to reproduce or information to help us do it. So the amount of time I spent doing that in this game was huge. Another point, I did no pre-testing. Well, we didn't have pre-testing really from QA for the game, the stuff we were working on. So I was checking in, I was breaking the build at various points, not all the time I might add. And that meant that, pre-testing was less headache. So if it pre-tested, the build would have been in better shape. My check-in wouldn't have gone in, I wouldn't have made a mess, and then I wouldn't be on the bad side of it where you've got your boss hammering you to get your bugs fixed quickly. The last point, it was difficult at this point, and this was something I found and I've tried to address since, to work on, you have a pile of tasks and you have a pile of bugs. The priority for should I be improving my task or should I be doing my bugs weren't very clear. We didn't really know what QA needed fixed and versus the needing to get the work done. And I mean, a lot of the time there's priority to get your tasks done, which is good, move the game forward, show progression. But at the same time, if you have blocking bugs that are making a mess in the game, you need to be fixing them as well. So now, this was the chance for me to make it right. So I finished Stuntman up, and then I went to go back to QA manager at Reflection. So they said, do you want to run QA? And I was like, yes, okay. I've sat on both sides of the fence. I know what it's like to be a tester from one side, and I know what it's like to, well, at that point, make a mess for other testers. So it was a chance to do that, so it was good. So the key thing was, this was for driver 3, and I know driver 3 was buggy, but that wasn't just down to bad QA. But we'll talk about that offline after. So I had a chance to build a team from the ground up. So it was for me, I could build it how I wanted, get in who I wanted, do what I wanted. So it was a clean slate, let's make this and do something that's a bit different. I could define the processes and the equipment I needed. I can go, okay, my boss is like, take this, do something well with this, do something good. So I'm like, okay. And the thing with this, we had an internal and an external team. So I'd have an internal team that were my guys, basically. And then at this point, we were owned by Infogrames/Atari. So they had 2 external teams, one in France and one in the US in San Francisco, or near San Francisco. So there was the approach for both. So what was I going to do then? So the initial challenges, basically, I set out what me as QA, how I'd like QA to run. You know, what do I want if I'm going to run QA, and how's it going to go? So I wanted to offer a high level of service. I wanted to make sure we had a team that were there, the QA team were there for the needs of the other team. We could offer support to the devs, we could offer support to the level designers, whatever we needed to. I wanted to offer a high level of service. That was one of my key goals. Second point, wanted to integrate QA into development and be more proactive. As I mentioned before, a lot of my previous testing experience, it was all reactive. It was all, here's a disk, play the disk, blah, blah, blah. I wanted to bring QA into the development a lot more. Let's fix stuff early, let's check stuff early, let's understand what's going on and not just deal with stuff when it's broken on the disk. Wanted to give time back to the developers. So we really, this ties in with the first point, we really wanted to make sure that it was, for complex bugs, it was tests that were spending their time to reproduce these for the developers, and it wasn't the devs spending their time, like in my first experience in games, where they spent all their time debugging and testing and so on and so forth, because it's a waste of money and it's a waste of time. The guys should be, obviously there's some testing for them to do, but they should spend the majority of their time fixing, not trying to reproduce bugs they don't understand. This obviously is another key one, and I don't think anyone will ever dispute this, is we really wanted to prevent build breakage. We really wanted to make sure that not only was it not broken for QA, it wasn't broken for everyone else on the floor. It wasn't broken for the LDs, the art guys, whatever. We wanted to be pre-testing check-ins that were dangerous. So this is moving to the proactive side. We wanted to go and get these. We didn't want to just be fixing the mess at the end. Offer real crash support. So I made this word up called stacklessness, but it looked quite good on the slides, so I put it on. So we wanted to offer real support as well. So my experience before, as I'd said on Stuntman, we had a lot of bugs or crashes which didn't really have any information. They were kind of random. We spent time to reproduce them. We'd never get anything. They'd be closed as not a defect or cannot reproduce, and it was gone. But there was something there, so we needed to get better at this. So we wanted to be able to offer call stacks to developers to say, this is a crash, this is what caused it, these are the points, and move that forward. And last, and this is another key one for me, wanted to have the finger on the pulse. I did not want to be stuck where we were getting builds every 3 or 4 days. We wanted to know what was going on in the game. At this point, I guess there was about 100 people in this game, maybe 110. So there's a lot of check-ins, there's a lot of stuff going on. If the build gets broken in the morning, there's maybe 50 check-ins after it, so it's a lot of mess to fix after, especially if you're collecting disks every 2 or 3 days. You need to understand where your team's going and what they're doing. So these were the goals and challenges and kind of points that I wanted to make sure I took care of as I built this. So going forward then, so my plan of action. So the first thing for us was we wanted dev kits. We wanted the ability to actually be playing debug builds and to be actually say, these are your crashes, this is what caused it, here's the call stack. So it's not just it crashed, here's no information. Because with bugs like that, unless they're 100% or relatively high percentage crashes, you never really know if you fixed the cause or not because you didn't really know what the cause was. Second point, this actually turned out to be a key thing for me, as I'll explain in a minute. We had build machines. We had capability to actually build builds in QA ourselves. We were able to take stuff, we can make changes, we could secure builds like that. And the last point, this was PS2 days, which obviously a while ago now. We had ProView for PS2, which meant that we didn't have to burn disks. We could pull the build off the server. We could build builds ourselves, so we could always be testing the latest. At any point, if we wanted to get a new build, we could do either grab the one off the server or we could do one ourselves. Quick copy across, 5 minutes, done. Latest build of the game for everyone. So resources. So again, I had a clean slate. I had authorization to hire as I needed. Obviously, within reason, I couldn't hire like 1,000 guys, but I had to work out what I needed. So the first one, and this may be more specific to the UK, we took work placement students. So they do a year out of university with us. So we hired them. They were a good choice. We took guys who understood programming. We didn't expect them to code stuff, didn't expect them to fix stuff, but they had a decent high level of understanding for what was basically going on. Actually, in the end of the day, though, they did actually fix some of the bugs, but I guess most of the devs will want to keep that one quiet. Second thing was we wanted to hire some experienced testers. We needed, we want to pack your team in a certain way with a certain split. So we wanted some guys who had been used to testing so they could help mentor the other ones. And the last one, I couldn't find a better word than newbies. I tried new people, but newbies look better, so I went with that. So we hired some guys who were enthusiastic and younger and wanted to test and wanted to do stuff, but didn't necessarily have games experience or computing science experience either. So process. So I had the equipment, I had the people, then I needed to work out what do I want to do. Well, here's how I do it. What do I actually want to be doing? First one, seek dangerous check-ins. Go, and we drove into the team, find out what you're testing, what's dangerous, what's coming in, and make sure we're testing them or anticipating and dealing with them before they're getting in the game. We're not fixing a broken build at this point. We're getting stuff fixed before it goes in. Second point, this also worked really well. We controlled the external builds that got sent out. That was part of my mandate. Nothing would ever leave the studio unless it had gone through me first and been approved by me or someone in the team. This meant that this included builds to QA externally. We didn't want to give external QA junk builds that crashed every 5 minutes. That wasn't the interest. We had to make sure that the builds that external QA got were good. Last point, compile build documentation. We'd been bored, I'd personally been bored of getting builds where I didn't know what had changed, I didn't have build notes, so we put a real effort into offering build documentation to builds that we sent out. We knew what had gone on, here's this, these are the things we changed, and it allows people to see what they should test, what they should pay attention to, or what they can ignore. So how did it work then? So the first slide was what I wanted and how I did it, so this is kind of the split I did at this point. So 2 testers, pre-testing only. So these guys, all they did was we sought out dangerous check-ins that were coming from across the team, stuff that might cause problems in the build, and 2 testers, that's all they did. They just did all the pre-testing for any developers wherever they needed it. But we really had to drive to get these check-ins from these guys to find out what was coming up. They weren't being volunteered. It wasn't like, hey, this might be a bit risky. Do you want to look at this? We really had to go in, find out what was coming up and how it was going to work. 2, dev kit reproduction of issues. So these guys worked on the dev kit, worked out the crashes. So random crashes were coming in. We didn't want a developer spending time on them. So we got 2 testers. They just played all day on the dev kit, tracked down the crashes, offer call stacks. These are the 2 computing science guys we used actually. So the latest source code, game crashed, we're able to get the developer, bring him here, say this is a crash, this is what happened. Then he can look at it and we can start debugging. And he's not spending time at his desk to try and reproduce something which he may or may not get. This wasn't literally half a tester, but it was like half a tester's time. So this, for me, was also a really important one. This guy was a knowledge gatherer. So we sent him out, find out what the dangerous check-ins are, find out what's coming up. So he was going into the team, he was seeing what was going on, he was working out what was coming up, what the guys were working on, talking to the leads, talking to everybody all the time. And he was the guy who then generated the build notes when we sent the builds externally. So he spent half his day doing that. To be honest, he may even spent more than half his day doing that, but the volume of information was great, but at least we knew what was going on and we could communicate clearly to people what was coming after. 3 testers, general testing. So these guys, we've got the build every morning. Because this was my internal team and we had external, we didn't have to spend longer term on the builds themselves. So 3 testers, they did general testing on the daily build, ran stuff, general passes, make sure stuff worked. Last one, the other half of the testers that was mentioned before, he spent time, we cycled builds during the day. So we couldn't offer a full suite of tests for sure on a game that was the size of Driver at that point with 3 people or 2.5 people. But we were able to at least get builds, check, make sure the basic functionality works. Can you shoot? Can you drive? Can you jump? All the basic stuff that allowed us to make sure the game wasn't fundamentally broken. Obviously, we missed some stuff, but we were able to put the finger on the pulse, look, we got this build in the afternoon, it crashed, take care of this, blah, blah, blah. So we knew the status, we knew what was going on, we knew what had been checked in, and we knew what potentially caused the problem. So this is slightly reactive to some extent, obviously, but it's reactive with a short space of time. It's not, I got a disk 2 days ago and this thing's broken. So, as I mentioned before, that was the internal team. That was how I set the internal team up. But we had publisher QA from Atari, or Infogrames, that were abroad. So they did the core of the general testing. That was how we set up to ensure the builds were good. And these guys were going to take the bulk of the heavy lifting. So the art testing, for all the characters, the vehicles, all the level stuff, the progression, all the longer stuff we pushed out instead. So, as I mentioned before, we were responsible for sending the builds. Because these guys were doing the heavy work, the core of the heavy work to log the stuff, we had to make sure that what they were getting, they were able to perform their jobs. Because we were moving quick in the game and we didn't want to leave people on a disk for a week because it didn't make much sense. So this was the basic process. This is when it goes right. There's another slide in a second which shows when it goes wrong. So the information gatherer or knowledge gatherer we talked about in the last slide, he prepared the build notes at the end of the night before. So let's say it was Monday night, he prepares the build notes. Tuesday morning, the test team get the build. We do a sanity, well, pass the sanity check, not just a sanity check, a bit more in depth to make sure it's good to go, doesn't crash too much, know what's going on. Build's then approved by me or the lead underneath me, and then we send that build to QA to make sure they have the ability to test everything they need to test, and they also have the notes to let them know what's been checked. So the notes included highlights for stuff that should be tested. So these are, let's say we'd refactored the AI's changed, pay attention to that. We changed the collision system in the physics, all these kind of things. So sometimes the notes were more sparse if there was a lot of level design stuff that had gone in that were little things, and sometimes there was big systems which had changed. So we put those in them. So this one I should probably have broken into 2, but I'll talk through it as we go. It's kind of basic anyway. So same original thing. Guy prepares the notes at the end of Monday. Tuesday morning comes, test the build. Except this time the build's rejected. It's not good enough. Let's say it crashes, or there's key stuff we want to do, but they can't test it because we know what they're going to test. So at this point, we sync the code that made that build to the QA machine. So we have build machines, we're able to do that. I don't want to stop everyone checking in on the main branch. We want to keep production going. Again, this was a busy time, so there's 150, 200 check-ins a day, no problems. But I want to make sure that if the build's broken, I'm able to just fix the issues that are stopping me to give that to external QA without having another 10 check-ins over the top where you potentially fix one thing that was broken before, but someone else has checked in and something else that's broken on top, and you just play this ever-revolving circle where you never go. And you don't want to stop general development on the branch because it causes the problems at that point. So to talk through it, so the guy prepares the notes the night before, test the morning build, build's rejected for whatever reason. Well, let's say it's a crash in a level design thing. Sync all the code to our machines at that point, flag the fixes we need, so I need you and you to fix these things. The guys work on that, they check them into the main build. We then take those 2 specific check-ins that fix the issues we're looking for, and we bring them onto our build machine and we generate a build for us. So again, this isn't the main build, we've kind of branched at this point. We build it locally, retest for approval again, then we have the 2 points. Is it approved? Yes, we send it, or no, it's broken for a set of reasons. Fix them again and go, and this process runs until we get that done. So this was maybe twice a week we did this, but we ensured that we weren't sending lemon builds to the external QA where they had 16 guys and they had a lot of powerhouse testing to do, but we didn't give them the capacity to test. And obviously with the team with the size we had internally, I couldn't mop up the difference, so it meant that we were losing time and losing money. We did a money calculation once to show lost time for builds that were broken, and the amount of money when you calculate through and people break the builds for the whole team for a year is ridiculously high. So then, to look at this was, I'm going to analyze what we did at this point, and then I have one more kind of topic to cover. So we offered a high level of service. I really felt we did. It'd been different to anything they'd done before. So we were pre-testing stuff. We were available for the guys. We were ensuring good builds went out. We did, we could build our own builds. We had a lot of capability to do things. Really gave developers their time back. I mean, I've been hitting on this one a lot, but when you do the math to work out, I'm going to make this coder test this build, or I'm going to have this tester test this build, and just do it in sheer money terms, giving developers time back to fix code stuff and having testers test the other stuff makes a really big difference. We definitely increased overall stability. I remember we had big changes in AI, big changes in physics, so we pre-tested the hell out of these. I mean, we had 2 weeks maybe where one tester was running through the physics stuff, 100 different tests every day, go. When it came in, it was, I'd say, 98% stable. So for sure, that made a big difference. Less random crash bugs. We, as a team, and as part of offering a high-level service, we wanted to remove the random crash bugs from the database. We wanted crash bugs in that had call stacks and had information and weren't random. We wanted to get rid of the randomness. So for sure, we were left with a few, but basically, guys knew what they had to fix, and they didn't have to spend half a day trying to work out why it crashed and maybe not even get the same one. Another key one, as I mentioned before, finger on the pulse. We were cycling builds regularly through the day. We knew what was going on. We could flag when something was broken, and it wasn't the next day when a pile of check-ins had gone on. Did we miss some stuff? For sure, because there was such a volume of check-ins. We can't keep a finger on everything, but we knew, we could say within 2 or 3 hour time frame, these things got broken then. These are the check-ins that are potentially possible, and then we'll look back and see how we could do it and fix it. This may sound a bit funny now, VHS, given that the time's moved on, but this was a while back. We used VHS while testing, so I guess nowadays we can probably do a lot of it on capture cards and we don't need this, but because we were making driver at that point, we had a lot of stuff spooled in. We never loaded, the simulation never stopped, so the game kept playing. So we'd have issues where something 25 minutes ago in the game would break and you wouldn't see it, and then it would cause the result at the end. So you can't write a bug that covers all the steps, so we used to tape for the guys who were doing playthroughs what they were doing, and then we could try and pick up the difference. We did find a pile of bugs that were caused by stuff that we didn't really understand, like maybe 15 or 20 minutes ago from when the event actually happened in the game, and it did save us a lot. But I don't suggest doing this all the time. Depends on your situation and what you're doing for sure. But if you have big games that play for a long time and bugs that can go wrong and caused a long time back, it's worth doing, whether you do VHS or just general capture. One problem we had, so this is looking at me and kind of the organization of the QA team at that point, we had priority issues. So I had this split for how I wanted the guys to act. I wanted to pre-test, we wanted to do the crashes, but at the same time we're getting pressure. A new build comes in, external QA are abroad or they've gone home, and it's like, this needs to be for the press tomorrow. So all of a sudden we're pulling guys off from what they should be doing and making them do something else. Test this press build, there's a demo, this build's come out, do this, blah, blah, blah. I mean, we did try and keep and stay on the mark for the stuff we did say we would do, but from time to time, for sure we didn't, and we pulled guys off. And then when we did that, obviously that led to the problems we had before, where the branch was unstable because no one had been testing, and the build became messier when we did do that, that was for sure. This is a good and a bad point, I'd say, and like I say, I'll cover this in a bit. So we all sat together, we were a QA team, we worked for the developer, so we had access to the developer, they were my peers, we all worked for the same company, we all worked on the same game, great. We all sat together, so we were able to help the juniors, we were able to discuss the build ourselves, look, I have this problem, have you seen this? That's valuable for sure, but from the bad side of that, we didn't sit in a team, we didn't sit with the developers, we knew them, but we didn't sit beside them, and to some extent that, it's good and bad. But the last point, and this, again, we'll come to the next point, is we were still a service, yeah? We offered proactiveness, we went to see things, worked out what was going on, we knew where we could go, we knew what was going to be checked in, we knew the risks, blah, blah. But we were still a service. We offered a service to these guys. We weren't integrated with them to some extent. So this then takes me to this slide. So I'm going to talk about now, that's everything I'd done before, and this leads me to where we are now and how I would do it now, and well, how I did it last time. So first thing, I'm going to go through the initial cost to set it up the way I would do it now. So the first thing is the leads time, and I'll explain which lead I mean in a minute. It's equipment again. I'm big for dev kits and big for build machines. I want QA to be able to build versions. I want them to be able to debug stuff. Budget for resources, obviously, nothing's free. So, you know, to lay stuff out, there is a cost involved with that. So how many testers can you have? How are you going to split them? And last, and this may not seem like a cost, but you would be really surprised at the actual level of cost this costs, is to convince people to change the way they think about stuff and convince them that a new system may be better than the current system they're using, even though they've used it for 10 years. It doesn't mean because you used it for 10 years it's the right way to go. You know, stuff evolves and stuff can change. So through my experience, we're trying to move to this model. I did spend a lot of time in the change management area discussing stuff, showing it was how it was beneficial. When you make changes, people's positions obviously change, so people need to understand what their expectations are of them. Management obviously changes too. If you're moving people to different teams, people's jobs change from the management perspective as well. So we had a big discussion about this, and that, for me, from kind of a time cost, is definitely the greatest one. So how would I do it now? So the way we changed is tester per team. And the difference is, I mean, this is kind of the Ubisoft structure, so everyone's structure is a bit different, but the tester is in the team and he reports to the team lead. He no longer reports to the QA lead. We changed this. We wanted to integrate the guys fully, and this, where I talk about us versus them, this is now the us. The guys are together. The tester is peer with the programmer. They work together, they have the same goal. He sits with the team, obviously. He's part of the team. He's not part of another team. It's not like, we're the AI team, you're the test team. The guy's in there, he's part of that. He's built into the team, he's a member of that team. And what comes from this, longer term, when you integrate a guy fully like that into the team, is he has specialized knowledge of that team, who's good, who's dangerous, which check-ins you need to watch out for, how stuff's going to work further on. So what's the expectations of a tester in this model? So the guy can build map/code. So this depends on the team. So for level designers, obviously, we're getting them to build, they have the capability to build maps. And for guys who work in 3D, they have the capability to build code. So this isn't, you might think this is technical, we need guys at super high level to do this. No, we don't. When I discussed on the last slide, when we talked about needed the leads time, you need a good lead who runs a team, who's able to mentor someone and show them how to do this. How can I help you to do this? And he needs to be able to support the guy while he learns and understands how to do the things as he goes. This guy, because he's part of the team, and this team's now responsible, we'll discuss, let's say the AI team. We'll talk about the AI fight team and give you direct examples. Of a tester who's part of the fight team, he knows what's coming up, he knows the dangerous check-ins, and because he's part of this team, the leader of the team knows what's coming, and it's just built together. It's not, we need to pre-test this check-in. Everything's being pre-tested all the time. That's the way they work. They're partnered together. It's not, I need QA to test my build. It's just, this guy's in my team, this is his job, we work together and we do it. It should be welcomed by the developers. It's not a negative thing, it's something we need to bring in. It's like partnering animators with programmers. It's natural. You do that when you're building fight systems or any other system. It's the same thing for this. Tests should be partnered with developers as we go. He's involved in the planning with the team. It depends if it's one or two. He knows what the team are going to do. So it depends on which model you're using, whether you're agile, waterfall, or whatever. He knows what's coming up. So for us, we did basically 2-week sprints. He went to the planning meeting at the start. He could see what was going to be done. He has a voice in the planning meeting too. He's like, hey, maybe you should pay attention to this. This is broken. Maybe we should spend some time on this. It's open floor. Everyone talks. He has the same level of authority as everyone else in the team. It's the same. It's all evened out. It's not, he's a QA guy, he can't speak. No, he's able to do that. He's part of that group. This one is a key thing for me as well. He checks when the bugs are coming in. So we have tester per team, but we have a general QA team as well. So the guys are entering the bugs as they go. They're putting the general stuff in. When the bugs are coming in, for whichever process you use, whether the producer assigns them, leads get them, or whatever, the tester for that team, he checks the incoming bugs with the lead. So when we're looking through and triaging the bugs, working out how to prioritize stuff, where to put it, that tester's involved in that process. Because he knows that team, intimately, and he knows what they're doing, and he knows how they're working. He's checking those bugs with the lead as they're coming in. So he's able to say, I know this is due to this will be fixed there, I haven't seen this before. And he's able to handpick as well the ones that he wants to take off that to make sure when they don't have clear reproduction steps or whatever. He's able to check that, so we're not spending time where developers are checking for bugs when they can actually be developing. This one, I underlined this is another key point for me. It seems everything's a key point, but this is really a key point. He's the voice of quality, and at this point, I don't mean he just flags these are bugs. He's also able to discuss where quality is impacted by the changes that are made. So, you've changed this is too hard, this guy's too difficult, the aiming system is not as good, you change the AI and I can't complete this. He's able to offer everything. Because he's integrated in this team, it's not like having a third party tell you, who don't really understand to some extent, what changes you made. This guy knows what the changes were for, what the goal was from bugs and from quality, and able to say, you might have changed this to make the AI better, but it's actually not better, it's not as much fun, this is why points go down. And because he's part of this team and he's involved in the planning and involved throughout, and he sits with the guys, they respect his opinion, they understand where he's coming from, and everyone in that team knows that the guy who plays the game most out of all of them in that team is that guy, and he's able to make that call. And he's not it's not an enforcement of this isn't, you know, maybe we want to leave it like that, but he's at least able to flag that that's an issue. He's also the source of knowledge for that team, and this goes into the next slide. He knows what the team have done, he knows what's going on, he knows the high risks. He has his finger on the pulse exactly for that team, for how that team runs and who does what. So how did we do this from a communication standpoint? So we did stand-ups. I mean, different teams work different ways, so you may or may not do this. So we split, each team does their stand-up. So we have the fight team, that's programmers, AI, obviously testers included. All these guys do their stand-ups at like 10:30, 10:45, whatever. Then afterwards they have an all QA stand-up. So all the testers go from their individual stand-ups and you take the knowledge together to discuss the high points. We obviously want to keep this quick so they're not discussing everything everyone's doing, but they cover all the high risks for the stuff that's coming up and the stuff for the day. So again, this feeds into the global tester stand-up where they're all working together. This is what I'm going to test. And as part of the global tester stand-up, the guys will cover what they're going to test themselves, and then from each guy from each individual area he can say, okay, this may be affected by this, you can look out for this, take care of this. So general testing, so obviously a guy's inserted, he becomes built into a team, but we still have a general QA team. I don't expect one guy to be able to debug the entirety of, let's say, the Assassin's fight system by himself. So there still is a general QA team. But these guys work together. So instead of trying to be the QA team who have to go and drag knowledge like I did when we first started with Driver, the testers work together. He's able to go to the QA guys in the main team and say, this is what we're doing, this is what we're going to work on, discussion of points, this is risky, this isn't. Again, past knowledge of what needs to be worked on. These are key things that are coming up. These are things that have gone in. These are things that you may want to watch out for. These are systems that have changed. Just, it's a general discussion. He knows exactly what the team are doing and what to work out for. Highlights risks. So the tester in the team, he's able, again, these points all really go together. He's able to say, look, this is what these guys are working on in the next week. You should look at your test plan and alter your priorities a little bit to be able to make sure you have time to account for that. Because a lot of the time I found, at least in test, you're dealing with risks like, hey, tomorrow we're going to check the physics in, so you guys need to have guys ready. I mean, you can be reactive and you can deal with it, but for sure it's a lot nicer when you have time to plan it and to deal with it properly. So he's able to do that, to tell the guys, this is coming up, this is how you want to do this, and just make sure everyone's aware and on the same page for what's going to come through. Again, this ties to another point we discussed before. We had guys integrated in the teams. We have a general QA team within the team, and then we also have external. So for Ubisoft, in this case, they used Test in Romania to do this. So QA still controls the build that gets done externally. This one, I can't hammer this point enough. You want to always do this to make sure that you're clear for what's going out, you understand what's going out, you know what bugs were in it, and it's clear. You don't want guys just to fire builds out where you don't know what it is, and you spend like 2 days mopping up the difference for all the bad bugs that went in for the build that was completely broken. So what are the benefits of this then? So key specialized knowledge per area. You have a guy who's able to build the game. He's able to debug to some extent. Again, this comes with the amount of mentoring that the lead offers. But for us, again, we took guys who were out of school and we managed to get them to do that. It wasn't, our expectations weren't, I expect you to debug and fix this, but to at least offer a level where the guys were able to do that. Again, I'm hammering this one, but I'm not going to stop. Developers develop. In my team, I want the programmers to program as much time as possible, and I want the testers to mop the difference. Communication's vastly improved. I have a guy who's built into this team. He knows the pulse of that team. He knows what's going to be developed. He knows how it's going to go. He takes care of that. He communicates outwardly to the other test team, and people are able to ask him. Because a lot of the time you'll find the lead, he's in 1,000 meetings, he has 100 things to do. There's always a go-to guy in that team. What are the problems in the team just now? Okay, it's that. Okay, I want to work on this. When's it coming? Okay, it's that. This guy can answer your questions, and he's available for that. Less broken builds, of course. All the check-ins, not just the ones that are flagged as dangerous, they are being checked in advance. This guy's part of the team. It's his job and it's the lead's job to ensure that they're not breaking the build, that they're ensuring that the build's stable and in a good shape. And they need to bring this together, and you need to own this. And that's how it worked, and for sure, if that's the case, then there's less broken builds later on. Other thing, no priority battles. As I discussed with the model I'd used before, I'd set up my guys and I wanted them to work in a certain way, but then different stuff came in. Here there's no priority battles because the testers aren't run by a centralized lead tester anymore. They're run by the guy who runs the team. He has priority battles within his group to some extent for sure, but he at least is able to make sure that the guys are working on what he thinks is top priority for what needs to be done, and guys aren't testing press builds or something else in between, which would happen otherwise. Quality, as I discussed, is maintained from both a bug standpoint and from a gameplay standpoint. Again, he's able to offer feedback on both, which I think is really important, because I know sometimes, at least experience from me both in and out, when guys are testers are putting quality bugs in, this is too hard, this isn't fun, blah, blah, blah. A lot of the time they're ignored by other people because they don't really care about their opinion. This guy, he's able to do that, and people do listen to him and do need to listen to him. So suggested minimum. So I appreciate at UB on games like Assassins, there's a budget there, everyone can do this. It's great in the ideal world, everyone has 100 testers, everyone's happy. It's not the reality for everyone, I understand that. So how would I do it? At the very minimum, if I was, if I had a few guys, I'd search out and I'd pre-test the dangerous check-ins for sure. I'd integrate the guys in, I'd want to do that. Let's make sure the build's not broken. Let's work to do that. Let's give build notes out. So let's say I'm small, I have 2 testers. Let's build notes so when I'm going to external, if I'm outsourcing my QA, if it's publisher QA or both, I'm at least giving them build notes so they know what's gone in, they know what to test, what we've worked on, what we've changed. This will for sure then fix the problems where stuff that you have specifically worked on and would like tested isn't tested. Have a dev kit or 2 for crashes. Dev kits these days, they don't cost that much. Let's give the developers their time back. Let's reproduce the crashes. Let's show them. Let's link these things together. And this ties to the one before, resource for reproducing issues. Let's allow the developers to develop. Let's have testers to reproduce stuff, go through the database, look for stuff that's low percentage, check them, see if they can reproduce them, close them if they're not and they can't, or give more information, pass it on. So once it lands with a coder or the level designer or whoever else, he's able to go, okay, these are the steps, this is what I need to do, reproduces it, takes care of it, fixes, done. So this isn't actually the last slide, even though it said close. So I'm going to discuss, this is slightly off topic, but I'm going to try and link it together the best I can. Say again? Yeah, because Ben asked me to do this, so I'll try and build this in. So one of my jobs, as well as producer at Ubisoft, was project closer. So I don't know if this position really exists anywhere else, so please tell me if it's the case, because I'm not aware. So the position within Ubisoft. So basically, you're a guy who comes onto a project, you're impartial, you have no relation to that project. You report to headquarters, so you're not reporting on the project. So you go in, you're independent, you can look at the project, see where it's at, you're not influenced by that. Drive the project to finish. That's the goal. You're there to close the project. That's the title's pretty explanatory, and that's exactly what you do. You want to make sure the project ships on time and to quality. When it's busy, there's the fog of war where, you know, it's a mess, there's all kinds of stuff going on. Your job in this, as a closer, you drive the priority. You say, okay, these are the things, this is the next milestone, this is where we're going, and you bring people together around that. Because you're impartial, you're not bothered about the system that some guy spent 2.5 years coding that, you know, displays flashy lights when you look in the sky, and, you know, that's not a priority at this point. So you're there to organize priority and clarity. You're the decision maker at this point as well. I mean, you do, for sure, you're polling the producer. You're not just coming in saying, hey, we're doing that. But in the end of the day, the buck stops with you. So you do have the power and the ability to do that. And this one, which was good and bad for me, I must admit, you travel to the needs. Like within Ubisoft, there's like, I guess, maybe 15 studios. So I spent time in Shanghai, time in the UK. When I first actually even went to Montreal, it was for that. So I traveled to go there. So you're sent, you go, you take care of it, you come back. The good part, I guess, when you're traveling to somewhere you don't know, is you don't know anyone else. So if you have to do overtime, you don't really care because you had nothing to do anyway. But I'm not saying that's really the best way to put that. So how does that work? What are the benefits if you do try and use that method or have a closer? The first point is no attachment to project. I've gone in and I've swathed the stuff to make sure it went. In the end of the day, I didn't develop it, I didn't spend time on it, I have no attachment to that. I'm not influenced by the producer himself at this point. I report, my structure goes up to HQ, he can't lean on me. Half the time I don't even know them when I'm coming in. There's no politics, there's nothing. You go, the job's clear, you make sure you know what you're doing, you take care of this. Experienced in the end phase. I mean, this, for me, I'm definitely, guys are good in certain phases. Some guys are better at selling stuff. Some guys are good in pre-production. Some guys are great in conception. Some guys are good at closing and finishing. Me, that's me. I'm good in the end. When it's all a mess and stuff needs to be clarified and taken care of, that's for me where my experience lies. And to have that, you have a guy, if you bring a guy in who does the closing method, he's experienced in the end, he's used to the mess, he knows what's coming up, he knows age rating, all these things, he knows how to take care of it. This is it. He understands age rating and he understands certification. He knows what you'll get away with when you put your build into age rating and make sure it doesn't get bounced. And for me, I think there's a kind of a fine art with that, especially with the USK. And he understands sort. I know enough to be able to put the build in for first submission so he won't kick me out while being angry, but enough to get feedback as well. So it's the kind of fine line between those 2 points. And another thing, this is why I put this one in, and with the us versus them. In this position, it brings QA and development together. You bring in someone in who isn't a QA guy, he's not a producer, there's no battle between these two. He oversees the project, he overlooks what's going on, and he's able to bring the two together for a common goal. And this helps us, as per the topic of the conversation, it helps build on us, and it really is about doing that because QA don't feel like they're being bullied by development, and they're not being pushed around, and we can work together to move stuff forward whilst getting their concerns addressed. So let's say you wanted a closer. What do you go for? So ideally, you take someone who has production/test experience. So for me, I'd done production and I'd done tests, so it was an easy transition for me. Some of the other guys from Ubisoft, they'd done just production or just tests, but they generally had a lot of time, spent a lot of time doing that, and they're used to the end phase. You need to, if you're going to have a closer, you need to mentor him at first, depending on his level of experience, because it's a lot of pressure, it's a lot of hassle. You're the decision maker, you suddenly find yourself where everyone's asking you the question, so you need a lot to make sure that you're taking care of that. The closer has to be empowered, and I can't hammer that one home enough as well. Like in our model, I reported to up through to Paris. I was empowered to make the choices. I could speak how I wanted. I don't mean swearing, but you know, we can make the case for what needed to be done, and it was clear. And I wasn't pushed down. I didn't feel like I wasn't able to say the case as it needed to be. I'm a clear voice in the project. When upper management are saying, "Tell me the status of this project," there's no dog and pony show from me. It's these are the things. This is broken. This is where we need to go, and that needs to be, if you do this, to have that. And ideally, if you're bringing someone in, you're not close to the project. I went to Shanghai for End War. I didn't know anybody. They sent me there. They dumped me there. Took care of it. It was easy. It is, to some extent, definitely easier when you don't know the people because you remain completely impartial. There's no, I'm going to do you a favor. I'm not going to say this. And these people aren't people that are going to affect your career in the future. I'm not saying that, you know, someone would negatively affect your career if you did that, but you're able to say what you want when you want and to give clear picture to them. So to close up for the last slide from me, so summary, key points, prevent build breakage. Again, let's pre-test where we can, make sure the build's not broken, make sure it's not a mess, allow everyone to work as much as possible. Allow developers to develop. Let's take the testing the best we can do to the most away from the developers to allow them to code, but whilst we're still maintaining a good level of quality and a good level of testing developed by testers. Let's communicate changes. Let's make sure we're doing build notes. We're sending out what's coming, what needs to be taken care of, where these things are. And last but not least, build on us. Make sure that you integrate the guys the best you can. If you can use that model, it's great. If you can use half a model, it's cool too. Whatever we can, but let's try and build it together and break the bridge between we're developers and we're QA. And last but not least, that's it. So if you want to send me an email on any of these points or talk to me after, it's fine. Thank you. Yeah, does anyone have any questions? Hello.
Yeah, so I had a question about, so you're talking about the sort of schism between development and the bug fixing. And you kind of basically, like you introduced it as an issue, but you kind of said, in terms of the solution, that it's still an issue. So I was wondering if you could address maybe like, well, how do you prioritize between those two different things?
How would you prioritize between when you should be developing stuff and when you should be fixing your bugs?
You should be working on new stuff, like to get the project done.
Yeah. Okay. I think that, well, there's no straight answer to this. Depends obviously on your priority for what you're going for. I think with a good level of testing before you're going in, the amount of bugs that end up in the actual game are less. So you do obviously for sure have more time to spend developing stuff. Aside from that, part of the closing job is to prioritize clearly what needs to be worked on for what goal and which milestone, and then you can help with that. So there's no straightforward, you should always fix this or you should always do that. It really depends where you're going. If you go into age rating, you want to make sure all your audio works, let's do that. Let's not bother fixing these level design stuff. If you go into sort, you want to fix your TCR stuff, and you're not going to bother so much with your audio. So it really depends. There's no strict right or wrong answer to that. I mean, this is a personal opinion, so I'll throw it out. I mean, that's what you're asking for. I've never really seen that work correctly, to be honest. And with game teams our size these days, I think our current's 150. I mean, it's difficult to be able to develop with any kind of speed when people are expecting to see results and to not have bugs at the same time. I mean, for sure, we want to be fixing the priorities. We don't want broken builds. We don't want to break the walkthrough. But if there's a little audio glitch or there's little things in the background that's lower priority, I'd shove that to the back and I'd take care of that later on. That would be my model to do it. I don't expect zero bugs when we're moving rapidly through and we're taking care of stuff. Yeah. They do have internal QA. I haven't been there that long, so it works in a fashion towards that, but it doesn't work exactly like that. It's something I will, if I can, try and change the way we can. They are integrated, and they do sit with us, and they do sit in the same building. So they do passes, and they do a lot of pre-testing. We have a lot of complex stuff going on engine-wise, so we do have branches where the guys are testing these things and making sure that the build doesn't get broken to the best. So is it exactly that model? No, but it's somewhere towards it. And personally, I would tweak it a bit more, but we'll see how it goes. It's certainly, I'd call it efficient at present time. It's not bad at all. How do you support it? Yeah. Yeah, no. I think part of it is the lead that he goes under. I mean, the lead's job to begin with is to take care of him, you know, to make sure he has that. So you really want to, as we're bringing them in, like the model we did, we had someone, and the lead spent a lot of time with them. Even for me, when I was producer, I spent time with them too to make sure they did have a voice. So, you know, they had the voice with the lead, and the lead took care of them, but they had a voice a bit higher too. So we got another picture, you know what I mean? It wasn't kind of capped where the lead kind of muted them down a bit. But are they influenced to some extent? Yes. I mean, you can't really avoid that, I don't think, exactly, which is why we have a general QA team and an external QA team too. So there's 2 steps after that line. But I think if the lead's strong and he's clear and it's mandated to those 2 guys, you're in charge of the quality and to ensure the builds are in a good state and taken care of, and you guys are responsible for that, then I think by default it falls, you know, the lead will be responsible and do that. But again, depends on the lead and who he is. Fortunately, the last 2 times we had good ones, and he did take care of that. And he was personally upset when the build was broken, so, you know, he was able to do that. But yeah, for sure, if the guys aren't as strong and, you know, they've been there for a while and they're buddies and pals, yeah, you will have that to some extent, I think. Yeah, I'd say no, but that's not true, because we took one of them and we made her a designer on that project when yeah, so I would say no, but it's not true. It's not the model for sure, but
so you talk a lot about the disconnect between QA and developers in general, but what about the disconnect that can happen with a developing QA that has that resource of being next to developer versus an external QA team that might feel cut off? They only receive developers, you know, you're sending out, but they're still kind of isolated. What are some try to get them
to get internal and external QA to work together? I think when we make QA send the build to external QA, it makes a difference, because you're responsible for that. You know, I'm expecting the lead to have gone through that. He knows what's going on. He needs to take care of that. So if the build's broken when it arrives on the other side, this is obviously publisher QA, so then all hell comes down. Your build's broken, you know. It comes from upper management all the way down the pipe. So you're responsible for that. What we did as well, for the last couple of projects in UBI, when we worked with Romania, we brought a guy across from Romania and we sat him in the studio with us. So he sat with the internal QA team, he worked with them, he was part of that group, and he could help communicate the stuff back out as well. So if you're working with people who don't speak English as a first language, it can help you fix some of the issues, you know, the language issues where there's misunderstandings due to tone or whatever. So we did that, and we used to make sure they were in touch 2 or 3 times a week where they'd call and they'd involve, and we gave them a key point. So there's the guy who comes across, he sits with the team, and there's another guy like the lead or the sub lead who's their key point if they have questions to come back in. And we tried to join them together. And external, we always made sure, even from project side for me, to let them know what the next goal was. Okay, this is a milestone we're heading towards, this is what it needs to be, these are the points, we want all the audio in, this needs to be there, this is why. So it's not just, here's a milestone with some vague stuff, it's like, here's the milestone, here's the points, this is what we need it for, like age rating, this is important to allow me to submit, these are the next stages, and so on. So they're clear with what's coming, and they're clear for their expectations as well, because I think where I've personally failed in the past is, we haven't been clear on external QA really what we want. It's like, here, test this build, you know, and there's a milestone coming up where I know what I need for that build, but I've never communicated my expectations to them. So they've tested other stuff or done other things, and then we've been upset at the end the build wasn't right. But in the end of the day, you get what you ask for. If you ask for the right stuff, you're clear, you push it, you'll get what you want back. And if you don't, at least you have measurable goals to say, I asked for these things, but you only delivered this. If I ask for this late in the day, then I'll get what I get, you know, and that's the way it kind of works. Do you have a question?
I was going to ask, you mentioned a lot of getting the QA to report with developers. Do you still see a need for a centralized QA lead on the embedded level, or do you find that the developers are able to coordinate?
No, I'd embed the guy, so he reports to that team lead, but I'd still have a centralized group, because the guy's job for the embedded guy is more to ensure stuff's going through, understands, but as we're on next gen, as we go to next gen, I mean, the size of the games are huge. So when you're testing multiplayer, I want a centralized team in-house for another resource. So I'll have a bunch of guys who report to that, so we'll still have another QA lead. And that guy, usually, he's impartial too. So he's a guy who's making the call to upper management, and he's saying, look, this is broken, this is why. And I do have an impartial voice on the team then, who's able to really say the situation and isn't influenced by anyone else on the project. Anything else?
On that note,
yes.
As the next gen sort of like rolls towards it, your project closer, does that role need to become like a team? And if so, like does that end up just becoming like another QA team, like a whole specialized QA team?
It has, even on this gen, to be honest, I have seen it where like on Assassins have had 2 or 3. Just due to the size of the game and the amount to cover and the time, they've needed 2 or 3 to take care of that. You take multiplayer, you take single player, you take exotic content, so on and so forth. So can I see it getting where they need more? Potentially, yes. Like I say, I've seen the model where I've had 2 or 3 already, so as games get bigger and more complex, I guess, yeah, for sure we'll do that. I guess that's time then. So thank you.